Hi, everyone. Welcome to our lunchtime webinar. Glad you're able to join us today for how to plan for surrogacy in the new year. Considering we are thankfully almost at the end of 2020, I am excited to be talking about what to plan for doing a surrogacy in the new year in 2021. So just a little housekeeping before we begin. You are all in listen-only mode, which means you can hear us, but we can't hear you. However, there is a question box on the side of your screen. So if at any point you would like to add a question, you certainly can. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to make time to make sure that we have a chance to answer any of your questions. If for some reason you have to hop off this webinar before we're done today, we are recording it and we will be sending the recording to your email after, so you can always go back and listen to it again. Usually it comes to your email in about a day or two. So who you'll be hearing from today, I am Jen Rackman. I am a licensed clinical social worker with Circle. I'm an outreach associate. I'm based in New York City. I'm also a parent through Circle's program myself. My husband and I have an 8-year-old son through egg donation and surrogacy as well. And so I am joined to have the honor of being joined by Anthony Brown, who goes by Tony. He's also an attorney based here in New York with me, and he is also a father through surrogacy himself. So he will introduce himself in a little bit. But Tony and I are here today to provide you this information. So what's on today's agenda? We're going to start with, are you emotionally ready to start your surrogacy? I think when you're thinking about getting ready to begin, I think there's some questions that you should be asking yourself. Are you emotionally ready? Do you feel like you're financially ready? And we're going to talk about how you can be financially ready and the different types of programs that we offer at Circle to help you plan financially, to give you options in terms of your cost. And so Tony's going to give you some information about that. We're also going to talk about, we're in a pandemic. Like, is it a good time to start? I've had that question come up repeatedly over the course of time this year, so we're going to talk about that. Why working with a surrogacy agency? What's the benefits of working with an agency, and to consider working with Circle, as well as your first step. How do you begin your surrogacy journey? So, are you emotionally ready to start a surrogacy? As a social worker, of course, we like to talk about our feelings and our emotions, and I think that coming to terms with, moving to surrogacy, and this is generally speaking, if you're a heterosexual couple, have you come to terms and accepting, that not carrying, not being able to carry a child, um, that pregnancy might not be possible or hasn't been possible to achieve, have you come to accept that that path and that decision making, transitioning to surrogacy emotionally, for some is a very difficult transition to make, so have you come to terms with accepting that you might not be able to carry your own child? And how does it feel with the idea of using a donor and or a surrogate? How does that feel to you? Is that something you're comfortable with? Is it something you're having some emotional struggles about? I think to explore, what does it feel like? I just met with a couple earlier and I asked, okay, here you are, you've tried IVF all this time, and the idea of transitioning to allowing someone to help you in this, what does that feel like to you? I think is a good question to ask yourself. Um, how do you feel about the relationship and the connection that you would have with these women, the donor and or the surrogate who you might need to help you build your family? Are you able to put your trust in them? Are you able to open yourselves up? Whenever I do consultations, we talk a lot about, the loss of control that you have here to some degree. There's a lot of things that are in your control, but obviously there are still elements that are outside of your control. And are you, knowing your personality, are you okay letting go of that control and being able to trust someone to help you and support you in building your family? Have you shared your thoughts with your partner or your spouse or your loved ones? Have you been able to open up and talk to someone about this? My husband and I think, went through a very dark time where we really weren't talking about our family building at all. We kind of put it on the back burner. I think there were moments where we both thought maybe we don't need to have kids. And it took us a long time to be able to start opening up and expressing how we truly felt about the paths that we were exploring taking. So I think, opening up to someone in your life, whether it's a family member, a friend, a therapist, someone that you can talk to about how you're feeling. Do you have a good support network in place? Knowing your support, knowing who's in your corner, who you can talk to openly about how you're feeling about pursuing surrogacy. And have you thought about whether, doing this alone or independently versus using an agency? I think that's one of the first decisions you have to make when you consider surrogacy is what type of services and providers do you need to help support you? And so later we'll talk about the benefits of using an agency, but I do have many people that I talk to that say, well, can I just do this on my own? And I say, absolutely, you can do this on your own. It just depends on what feels right to you. So I think exploring how you're feeling about pursuing surrogacy. How do you feel about bringing these women into your life, whether it's a donor and a surrogate or just a donor? How do you see your relationship with them? And what is that relationship like during the process, after your child or children are born? And knowing your support network, knowing who's there for you to support you as you go throughout your process. So whether you're a heterosexual couple, a gay couple, or single parent, I think these questions are all very relevant in terms of just knowing, being in touch with yourself, being in touch with how you're feeling. When you bring in a third party into your life, outsiders, whether it's an agency or a clinic or a lawyer or a surrogate or a donor, how does that feel to you to be open to those supports and involvements? So I'm going to pause a minute and be back in a little bit, and I'm going to chime in Tony, who's going to talk to you about, how can you be financially ready to start a surrogacy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Anthony Brown. I'm an assisted reproduction attorney here in New York, as Jen said, and also an outreach associate with Circle Surrogacy. My husband and I went through this process about 13 years ago, and our son is 11. So it's kind of wonderful to work with an organization where so many people have a personal investment in it. I know surrogacy can be very scary, particularly looking at this page. You realize how much planning goes into surrogacy. There are no accidental surrogacies. They are very carefully thought out. And I think that the reason that Circle went into a fully fixed cost program, one of the first agencies that really went into a truly fixed cost program was because there's so much financial insecurity in this process anyway, that Circle really wanted people to know what they were going to spend and to be able to budget for that, so that there weren't going to be unexpected issues around money that come up that create a further either emotional issue during the journey or a real financial issue for some intended parents. So we are going to discuss our 2021 price programs. They're designed to mitigate this kind of financial insecurity and to give you a clear idea of what the process is going to cost. So we have two programs. We have a fixed cost program where all of the costs, excluding IVF, are covered up to one transfer, one embryo transfer. And if you come to our program with your own embryos, then that program cost for the fixed cost program is $128,750. If you come to our program without your own embryos, many of our same-sex couples require egg donation. They come in through the egg donation program. Then the fee is $149,750. Again, this excludes IVF, but this is the cost that you pay leading up to one transfer. Now, a transfer, when you have an embryo transfer, sometimes they fail, sometimes they don't work, the pregnancy doesn't take, or sometimes your carrier might have a miscarriage during the pregnancy. And for those reasons, we created what's called the Journey Protection Guarantee Program. What this does is, for an additional $10,000, it gives you unlimited transfers until you have a child. So you don't have to worry about always going back and paying another $10,000 and another $10,000 if your transfers don't work. So upfront, you pay that $10,000 in the surrogacy only program where you have your own embryos. The cost of that program is $137,250. And if you are in the surrogacy and egg donation program, to be in the Journey Protection Guarantee program, it's $158,250. Remember that these costs are the surrogacy side costs, not the IVF side costs. You're going to be having this conversation with your clinic about what their costs are and if they also have some kind of a protection guarantee program like we do with Circle. So let's talk about some options to help you become financially ready. How can you prepare for this? You can, if you have equity in your home, a home equity line of credit is often going to be one of the best ways to have access to a large sum of money and be able to pay it back with a reasonable interest rate, a lower interest rate. So if you can refinance your home, or if you have liquid assets that you can take a loan out of, you can get a better interest rate. But there are some programs, including one that's very specific to Circle, where you can obtain an unsecured loan, or what's called a non-collateralized loan. I'm going to speak very specifically about the financing program through Circle in a moment, but there are places where you can get these unsecured loans. Another one is an organization called Prosper. We are seeing now larger corporations providing benefits to their employees. There's an organization called Resolve, an organization called Carrot, and an organization called Progeny, and they are working with employers to provide assisted reproductive benefits to their employment packages. For heterosexual couples, there may be some tax credits that I always have to unfortunately make this distinction because the IRS has made a distinction here because of the medical necessity that is deemed that attaches to heterosexual couples who go through the surrogacy process. There may be some tax credits involved. And then the organization I mentioned before, Resolve National Fertility Organization, they are working not only with larger corporations, but they're also working with legislatures and with states to create legislation that would perhaps mandate insurance coverage for assisted reproductive technology, changing the definition of medical necessity for assisted reproduction. So it's a wonderful organization, and if you can support it or find out how to advocate with Resolve, I strongly suggest it. It's wonderful. So let me tell you about our financing program. It's the first time ever that there's specifically a financing program for surrogacy and egg donation. We have a partner organization called Origin Finance. They work exclusively now with Circle Surrogacy, and it allows our United States intended parents, and this is with any kind of organization like this, they have to be licensed in different states. So right now it is available in the US, and there are certain states where it's not available. I can go through those in the question section in a moment. But it allows you to borrow $65,000 of the cost of the journey, and you can choose to pay that back over a 3-year period or over a 6-year period. Now, remember, this is a non-collateralized loan, it's unsecured, so the interest rates are going to be higher. If you pay back over a 3-year period, the interest rate is 6.25%. And if you pay back over a 6-year period, the interest rate is 7.75%. What does that look like? If you pay back in 3 years, it's about a little over $1,900 a month for 3 years to pay that back. And if you pay back over 6 years, it's a little over $1,100 a month to pay back over 6 years. One of the good things about this program, though, is if you say you only need $40,000, you don't need the full 65. You can take out the 65, pay back $25,000 the next day. There's no interest or penalty on that. You just pay it right back, and then whatever's left over, that's what you pay the interest rate on. So it's a great program if you need a little extra money and you need some leeway in paying it back. When you do take this loan out, the $65,000 does go directly into your escrow account. So it's a very easy, seamless process. Okay, so let's talk about um, starting in a pandemic. I know that this is one of the biggest questions that our intended parents are asking themselves, and I believe Jen will agree with me. It's been really interesting to see how many people are uh, realizing the importance of creating their family and the importance of starting their family because of the pandemic. So some things to keep in mind about the process itself. The journey takes a while. It takes between 15, 18, maybe up to 24 months from when you join Circle to when you have your child. There's going to be a 5 to 6, possibly 7 month matching period. The more restrictions you have or the more qualifications you want in a surrogate, the longer the matching time may be. And then once you have matched with your surrogate, there's going to be 2 or 3 months before the embryo transfer actually occurs. So you're not going to really expect your first transfer to occur until 8 or 9 months, perhaps after you join. So say you join next month, you're not going to even go into try to get pregnant until August or September of 2021. So there's a forward thinking timeline that may inform your decision about starting in the age of COVID. But we are prepared to deal with your concerns. And I know one of the greatest concerns has been financial instability. We have done a couple of things in response to that. One of them, and the main one, is we offered a split payment program so that some of the payments are split up over time. So it's not a huge chunk of money and then for one payment and a huge chunk of money for the other, that we let you hold on to your money a little bit longer if you choose that option. So we will modify the standard agreement to provide for some of those options. I can tell you that our legal team is absolutely the most amazing legal team I've ever seen. They have been working with our intended parents who've been giving birth during the COVID crisis. They have been working with the hospitals. They have been working with the courts to ensure that the parents make it to the birth of their child, that they have all of the documents in place, that they have access to the child in the hospital, and that they can return home with their baby. So they have been truly working overtime. And one of the most astounding areas that they have been so effective in is working with our international parents who are dealing with quarantine issues when they come into the country, to help them know the timeline, to know the time frame that they have to get into the country to quarantine before they can be at the birth of their child, and then getting the documentation that they need to either to enter the United States or to leave the United States with their child. So we've done a lot of work assisting our intended parents during the pandemic, but ultimately it is got to be your decision of when to start this process. I'm going to hand it back over to Jen to talk about working with an agency, and I'll be back for questions. Jen?
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I mean, I know that the question about when to start, when is the right time to start a surrogacy, is different for everybody. So you have to feel like it is the right time for you, whatever that might be. And, you know, the good thing about COVID in some respects is that, it has been a learning process for all of us. And things have only become more manageable and more, um, you know, easier to navigate as COVID has been with us longer. And so by the time people I meet with now that are going to get started soon, I said, look, if we fast forward a year and a half from now when your baby is born, and this is still quite a discussion, at least on the upside, we are very well prepared on how to help you navigate that. My hope is that by the time you get to birth, that COVID is not as much of a concern as it is now. Um, So why work with a surrogacy agency? Why do people decide to work with an agency. I think, looking at providers and knowing their background in terms of their, surrogacy expertise. Agencies are made up of professionals in experience with surrogacy as well as egg donation, knowledgeable. We've been around for 25 years, as an example of surrogacy experience. And so having a background in surrogacy, having the legal expertise, depending on what type of agency you select, most agencies either have legal counsel in-house or they're working with a provider from outside, but having the legal expertise who can help you with contracts, your legal needs, are two critical components, very important of a surrogacy journey. And so lawyers that are experienced with assisted reproductive technology, or ART law as we call it, um, having an in-house legal team like we have at Circle does provide seamless communication between the legal team, the program coordinators. It allows for streamlined communication across teams and allows you to have that support, that legal support, going through your process as well. An agency manages the entire process so that you don't need to, whether it's screening a surrogate and a donor, working with you towards your match, coordinating with your medical providers. The idea of a full service support team means you'll have an attorney, a social worker, an accountant, all in house to be able to be there to support you in your process. Legal and insurance issues, and help you get coverage during the pregnancy, and then talk to you and guide you in providing coverage for your child post birth. I'm sorry, that was a mouthful. In terms of making sure that your carrier is insured, making sure that there is coverage for the baby, is all part of services that an agency will provide, and helping you get then prepared for birth, preparing for your own trip, your stay during the delivery, making sure you have all your legal documents, everything in order, that the hospital is prepped, that they know that you are the parents, that she is your surrogate. They'll have all that information ahead of time, and then helping you then prepare for your safe travels home. Um, Detailed accounting and financial support, managing your funds to ensure that your surrogates and the bills are getting paid and getting paid on time. It's nice, I know, speaking as a intended parent myself, to not have to worry about those things. I think that knowing that you're signing up with an agency who you can then trust to manage the process for you, and so that you can, and not that you're not involved, because obviously you are. It's just having that support in place to provide you with the guidance to get you from start to finish. 5 reasons to work with Circle Surrogacy in the new year. Circle is a full service agency, right? And I always compare, us New Yorkers, that we like to say, like a one-stop shop, like having everything in one place, meaning we have our own legal team, social workers, case managers, accountants. Everyone is in-house at Circle that are dedicated to helping you and creating a plan that is yours, that is specific to your needs. Um, Personal experience and longevity. As I said, we've been around for 25 years. We just hit the mark on 2,300 babies have been born in our program, a tremendous amount of experience behind us. And 40% of our staff at Circle have some sort of personal tie to the field. Like Tony and myself, we are both parents through the program. We have folks on staff that have become parents through IVF or adoption. We have folks on staff that are former surrogates or former egg donors. So a lot of people that you come in contact with at Circle have been there, understand your perspective from personal experience as well. We do encourage relationships between parents and surrogates and egg donors. We do take a relationship-based approach to this process because we find that openness and transparency and communication are vital aspects of doing a surrogacy. That doesn't mean, people will often ask me, do I have to then be best friends with my surrogate? Is there pressure to remain, this lifelong strong connection? And if that happens, great. We love that. But there's no pressure, in the sense that what we want is for you to feel connected. We want you and she to be able to communicate well with one another, to be able to have that reciprocal relationship throughout the process, to provide support for one another, because we find that is a healthy experience for everybody. Um, we practice a high quality process for screening our surrogates and our donors. We accept less than 2% of our surrogates into the program. It's a really rigorous screen that they have to go to. Our surrogates are fully screened prior to their match, which means there's a lot of work that's done in order for a surrogate to be approved to be a part of our program. And should you come and sit down with us and talk to us at a consultation, I'm always happy to walk people through in detail what does that screening process look like. And as Tony already talked about, we have two fixed cost programs to help you navigate and help you plan for your own financial steps and help you control the costs. We understand this is an expensive process. Both Tony and I know firsthand. Um, it's a lot to think about. So, we are there to help you hopefully feel as comfortable as you can taking those costs on. So how can I start my journey? Where do I begin? You begin by meeting with us. This webinar is a great opportunity to get some overall general information. But if you feel like surrogacy is the right path and you want to take it a step further and learn, excuse me, um, more details, we offer free private consultations. They're one-on-one. You would meet with spend some time with a process consultant like me, a social worker, to learn about the process. And then you'd spend time with one of our attorneys like Tony and go through details about costs and insurance, and what the process looks like. So we offer them, obviously now with everything being virtual, they're very easy to set up at a time that's convenient. You could see here our colleague Lauren Endrick's information. You could always reach out to Lauren and she's happy to set that up for you at any time. So I'm going to leave the screen up so if you want to take that down. But we have reached the end of our webinar presentation. I'm happy to open up questions. I'm going to just pull up my little question box and see if there's any. Oh, there's a couple of questions already. Great. Um, so Randall asks about webinars for gay couples, and I'm glad that you asked that question because we do have a very detailed webinar agenda going on. So if you go to Circle's website and you click on events, you would see a list of consultations and one-on-one sessions as well as our webinars. And we do actually have two webinars coming up in January that are geared towards discussing sorry, the LGBTQ parenting. There's one with just a lawyer, and then there's one that's also pairing up with the Gay Parents to Be program with RMA of Connecticut. We're doing a joint webinar with them as well. So there's definitely a tremendous agenda there that you can look and pick out webinars. And webinars are always free. They're always great ways to dip your toe in and get information. So I hope you'll access them. Um, how is it possible the cost is so great? Oh, Antonio, I certainly understand that question. Tony, do you want to take that one? Why is the cost so great?
Yeah. It's there's so many components that go into the the process, and I remember thinking to myself, back long ago when I went through this, I was the spreadsheet guy. I had everything written down about, how much everything cost and where everything went. And it's really interesting. There are different components to the costs. The first component is going to be agency fees, and with any agency, you speak to, those should always be fixed costs. That's going to be whatever it takes to screen egg donors and screen surrogates and do programs like this. All of the work that is done from sort of an administrative point of view to make everything run. So that's going to be anywhere between 30,000 maybe and maybe a little bit north of that. The carrier fees is a second component, and there are many elements within that. There's base compensation. There are contingencies. If something happens, if she needs to go on bed rest, then she's going to get extra money to cover for say daycare or childcare for her. If she misses work, she'll get compensated for that. There's a whole range of costs around the carrier fees, her travel to and from the clinic. There's another component cost of insurance fees. Insurance fees are going to be in Circle. We offer an insurance package, and the insurance package value is at about $20,000. That is, it includes a life insurance policy. It includes backup insurance if her primary insurance fails, or if she doesn't have insurance, we use that backup insurance. It includes a complications policy that if there are complications that aren't covered under her normal insurance, um, her insurance package or her insurance plan. And also with Circle, we also include insurance defense. So if there are any denied claims, we have attorneys on staff who work to address those. Of those three components, those are really the surrogacy side components: the agency fees, the carrier costs, and the insurance. The carrier costs are definitely the highest of that, because that's going to also include elements of that are also going to include the legal work, because she needs to have her own attorney. Your egg donor needs to have her own attorney, and also when we create parental establishment for you, there are other attorneys involved. So there are legal fees that come into that category. And then the final category is your IVF costs. And those are going to be different with every clinic that you talk to, but they range for gay couples who need to create embryos, find egg donor and create embryos. Those costs are going to be somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000, maybe a little bit north of that. And if you already have your own embryos and you are coming in just for the surrogacy only program, then we estimate the IVF costs around that to be around $9,000 to $13,000. And that's for the screening of the carrier, her medications, and the actual embryo transfer. So I know that was a lot of information, but it helps you understand why the costs are so significant, because there are so many moving parts to the process. And to do the process correctly, every single one has to be paid attention to, and every single one has to be provided for. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. Thank you. I know Antonio also pointed out how the costs can be a lot less looking at overseas surrogacy, like in Russia, for example. And yes, there's definitely um, cheaper ways to go about doing a surrogacy and less cost. However, I think there's pros and cons to doing things here versus overseas. And, to me, I think the biggest pro of doing it here in the US is that you have the ability to be engaged, to have a connection to your carrier, to be connected to, I think you have a lot more options and ability to make decisions as part of the process, which I think you have some limitations when you often look at overseas surrogacy. Um, and I know Antonio also asks, in the stay during delivery, is the babysitter also included? No, the babysitter is not included. That you are the child's sitter and caretaker from the moment that they are born. If for some reason you are delayed in arriving, perhaps the baby came early and you're not there, obviously we talk about creating a plan for your child's care, usually then provided by the medical staff at the hospital until your arrival. Um, so Randall asks another question, and he says that he has spreadsheets, and I love that, about how to know when to do a one-on-one appointment versus attending a webinar. And I usually say, if you are within the year and you're going to begin your surrogacy, it's a good time to do a one-on-one session with us. Obviously, the closer you are to starting, the better. Webinars are great ways to dip your toe in and get some general information. But if you really want to start creating your own plan, it's a nice way to kind of have a sit down, a one-on-one session about your specific needs. And is there health insurance for twin journeys, pre and post delivery insurance? I mean, Tony, can you take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really interesting question. And the line essentially is drawn for domestic couples and for international couples, because international couples have very few options to get US based health insurance for twins. There are only two organizations that offer it. You have to go on their policy, and you have to be on their policy for a full year before you can put children on the policy. And they also check your carrier. They have a health requirement. So your carrier is checked at 20 weeks. And if she's had any spotting, if she's had any issues at all, they'll refuse coverage. And the issue with insurance, particularly with twins, is that you're providing for that worst case scenario. And unfortunately, with twins, there's a much higher chance that they're going to be born prematurely. And there's, I think it's a 70% chance that they'll be born prematurely. And in 50% of the time, there is a stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. So if you do not have insurance, those costs can go absolutely through the roof. If you have US based insurance, remember, the carrier's insurance is one package. Once the children are born, they go on your insurance. If you have a PPO plan or an out of network preferred provider option plan, you can put twins on your own insurance and they'll be covered. But some of the things that you may not expect are if your carrier, say, is in Utah, you have children born prematurely. If you're single on your own, you may be living in Utah for 2 to 3 months. Or if you're, in a relationship, one of you may be living in Utah for 2 to 3 months, however long the children are in the neonatal intensive care unit. So there are issues around the cost with twins that go beyond money. But for international IPs, international intended parents, the options for insurance for twins are very limited. And so much so that I would counsel absolutely against it. If you do have an out-of-network insurance plan, you can put twins on it domestically.
Thanks, Tony. And you could take this next question too. When Anne asks, can you give us an idea about when costs are due all along the process? What do you pay up front? What's due later?
Absolutely. So usually the first cost is going to be when you sign on with your agency. That's the first legal milestone also that you're going to go through. You'll sign the agreement for services and you'll make a first cost payment. That's going to cover the agency fee. It's also going to cover a couple of other aspects to get you ready for matching. So the first cost is going to be somewhere around, say, $56,000 or $57,000. That's when you sign on. So after you've signed on, you are going to get in the queue for matching. And maybe 5 or 6 months down the road, the second payment will be due. And if you're in our gestational surrogacy program, if the first payment is $56,000, the second payment will be $72,750. And that is going to fully fund the carrier's escrow account, her compensation account. So all the money is in there at the beginning of the journey, and it fully funds her insurance account. I had described in the webinar that we come up with some split payment options where, for instance, if you are in the gestational surrogacy and egg donation program, you'll make your first payment when you sign on. You'll make a second smaller payment when you match with your egg donor. You'll make a third payment when you match with your gestational carrier, and almost immediately following that, usually within a month or two, you'll make the final payment. So it's spread out over, over a period of time, usually from when you sign on to when you match, which right now is about 5 or 6 months. If you want to have twins, it's going to be longer because it takes longer to match with a carrier to have twins. So you can anticipate, essentially 2 payments about 6 months apart from one another.
Thanks, Tony. How big is your egg donor database relative to other agencies? Does the egg donor have to consent? Are eggs frozen? Are they retrieved? Ian, that's a great question. I do think that our egg donor database tends to be more robust than other agencies. We have about 350 donors on our site. And should you decide to move forward with Circle, we also have partnering agencies that we can then branch you out to, and that could bring your pool up to about 1,200 donors. So there's certainly a lot of opportunity there. I haven't seen other egg donor agencies have such a large database to access. Does the donor have to consent? She does. Whether the agreement is anonymous or known is your choice to make, and we certainly would talk to you about that to make the right decision for you. But she does have to consent to provide her donation for you in the sense that they are not frozen eggs, which is your next question. They do have to be retrieved. It is not an egg bank. That is the difference between an egg bank versus an egg donor agency. In an egg bank, you'll find frozen specimen that are already there created, and in an egg donor agency, you'll match with a donor who will do then her donation for you. And then however many eggs are retrieved are yours. And so it is somewhat of a reciprocal relationship. Now whether you have shared identity or not is your choice to make. um, Next question, what are the costs if the baby has to stay in the NICU after birth? Tony, you want to take that in terms of insurance
Sure.
coverage?
Yeah, this is going to be covered under your insurance. Uh, However, if the insurance doesn't cover it, um, we estimate that, and some of our international intended parents prefer to just pay the hospital directly for costs associated with the child, as opposed to getting insurance for the child, which is it is an option. It's a scary option in my mind, but those costs for a healthy singleton are probably between $2,000 and $9,000. If a child goes into the neonatal intensive care unit, depending on how long they are there, the costs can go up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's when even an insurance plan may not cover all of that. It may cover a percentage, but not all of it, and there may even be a cap. So I think the conversation around having twins certainly needs to include the financial aspect of it, but it also really, one participant in the conversation really has to be your IVF physician. They will be able to tell you the percentages, they'll be able to tell you the effects on the children, they'll be able to tell you the effects on your surrogate, because carrying twins is a much harder prospect than carrying a singleton. But I have seen costs in the neonatal intensive care unit go into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, particularly for twins who were there for, you know, 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, so Anne's question says if it's for, the NICU question is for international IPs. And so, I think that Tony's advice, our advice always is that international intended parents should plan to do a singleton to reduce, to make sure that, you know, it doesn't say that a NICU might not be necessary for a singleton, but it is less likely to occur with a singleton than with twins. And most hospitals in the US, I will say they do give generous self-pay discounts. So a lot of our internationals who just pay the hospital directly for services, I've seen reductions in their rates to up to 75%. So even though it sounds crazy, these bills that go up to the hundreds of thousands. I've also seen hospitals, when they know people are paying out of pocket, really reduce their rates considerably if that's the case. But that is part of our discussion with you. When we meet with you to learn about your family building goals, the one versus two babies, looking at do you have coverage here in the US, do you not, and advising you as to help you best make a plan that's safest and most obviously nothing is certain in terms of, there's always risks involved, but obviously to make a decision that will take on the least amount of risk possible. Um, the last question I have here is from Antonio. Is there an age limit for a single man? So we do have an age limit for singles, which is 55. We do take cases that are age 50 to 55 on a case-by-case basis, kind of based on our conversation with you in terms of looking at things like support network and overall health and plans moving forward post birth with in terms of childcare and managing work balance life. We have this conversation with all of our intended parents, but I think especially our single parents, to just kind of know that you have a plan in place and that you have good support as part of our initial conversation with you. So 55 is the cap, and then 50 to 55 is on a case by case basis. um, we've reached the end of the questions that people have put out there. They were great questions. I appreciate you giving us some more things to think about and more information to share. I'm going to give another minute or two if people want to post any last questions before we finish today. Tony and I are both here to be resources. You could always reach out to Lauren and she can connect you to us if you want to have a phone call or move on to a full consultation. We are happy to be any kind of assistance that we can. Um, I'll give
Yeah,
another minute for
Jan,
questions.
I wanted to piggyback on something that you had said earlier regarding surrogacy in other countries, because one of the things that a lot of people don't realize for gay men who have surrogacy in other countries is oftentimes you either have to, for instance, in South Africa, you have to establish residency. In some countries, you have to pretend that the surrogate is your partner. So I think there's a whole ethical range of issues and red flags that can come up that address more the LGBTQ community in doing foreign surrogacy than say different sex couples would encounter. I guess my suggestion to you is if at any point in time you feel those red flags, you get a sense that this just doesn't feel right inside. That's the reason for me why surrogacy in the United States is such an optimal choice. Those red flags don't come up. The laws are set here. You don't have to compromise yourself in any way to undergo the surrogacy process here. While you are going to be paying a little bit more, that to me the extra funds that you put into the journey come out in safety and in security and in going through an ethical journey where you know your carrier has independent legal representation and you know that she understands the process and no one is being taken advantage of. I just wanted to throw that in there because I think for same-sex couples, particularly for gay men going through the process, um, those issues can arise in foreign surrogacy situations.
Thank you, Tony. I love your input always. I think we've reached the end of our webinar for today. Thank you for joining us. And we went a little bit over. We try to keep them to a half hour, but it doesn't always turn out that way. But I'm glad that you were able to stay on and listen. And hopefully we will connect in the new year. Wishing you all the best of the new year. Healthy, happy, safe New Year's. Thank you, Tony, for joining me on this webinar.
Thank you all for being here, and please do feel free to reach out to Lauren if you have any questions and want to have a more in-depth conversation with us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.